Welcome to another episode of Show Me Your RAIDLOG, where we talk with industry leaders about how they use RAIDLOGs and similar tools to help project managers succeed. I'm Kim Essendrup, co-host of the Project Management Happy Hour podcast and one of the founders here at RAIDLOG.com. I've used RAIDLOGs for years to save broken projects and to keep my own projects from getting broken, and I'm really excited to see how other leaders use theirs. With me today to talk RAIDLOGs is Jamie Marzonie, who I met at Project Control Summit this year in Galveston. And so I'd like to say welcome, Jamie, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Kim, great to be here.
Outstanding. Well, before we get started, can you tell our audience just a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so kind of stumbled into risk management. I ended up kind of doing this maybe in profession on the side for a long time. I've been having over 25 years involved in both the owner and the contractor organizations in various different industries, in lithium and food, telecommunications and life sciences. And, I was previously always working with the Internet of Things before we had an acronym of that, I always like to say. But overall, one of the things I like to say I do is project management and in different areas of businesses. I play with Legos. Does everyone like Legos, right? Right. So what's Legos? It's kind of when I think about what projects are and operations and organizations. I've really been trying to put together different Lego pieces in different orders. Legos have rules around them, and every organization is kind of composed of these different Lego building blocks. Every project, the only thing that makes it different is that we might have a different output, we might have a different customer. But all projects are more similar than they are different. Same thing with organizations. They're more similar than they are different. Even if we think that we're really special, we're actually not. We all have the same building blocks, and some of our building blocks are put together better than others. And so, like all models, we try to leverage what building blocks work best for different problems and solutions. What decisions do we have? Well, we have these options to tackle some of these decisions. So our options for these decisions is really how are we tackling these risks? How are we managing these issues, these actions, these decisions? Putting them order it together so we can get really a good vision and that's aligned with our values and our objectives helps us kind of reach those goals. And for me, Legos are really that hallmark of what risk and decision management is, and RAIDLOG fits in with that well, I think.
And like Legos, sometimes you get those two little ones, they stick together and it's really hard to pull them apart.
And sometimes you step on them too, which is bad.
Well, can you share a little bit, Jamie, about what you're doing these days?
Yeah, so at IPS, I'm currently supporting a multi-billion-dollar pharma program, working on the GLP-1 API, an active pharmaceutical ingredient. If you've heard about GLP-1s, there's a couple different customers out there who are making it. Go ahead and see it. It's very popular, very hot on the market. We have a project and program controls team that's out there, and we're managing those folks to get effective delivery through the EPCM as an owner representative. In addition to that, I'm helping in the business development of our project controls offering and our key life sciences businesses, as well as our other industry agnostic services space, such as our successful utility PMO program that we have. Also had the privilege of having some time to speak at the recent Project Controls Summit in Galveston and chatting with some guys who do this RAIDLOG stuff.
Yeah, it was really great meeting you and having some really cool conversations about risk management and some of the things that you've got going on. And so with that, I'd love to ask you a few questions about one of my favorite PM tools, RAIDLOG, of course, and get your perspective as someone who's got such a depth of understanding and experience around risk and issue management.
Sure. The first time, I learned about RAIDLOGs, I'd have to kind of figure out when that was. It would have to be a long time ago. And my father was a kind of a project manager, director, and working up through General Electric on combined cycle gas turbines and things like that, early cogeneration, before it was a new thing. And, I'm kind of trying to think back at, before my professional world, through that experiences, just watching some of those projects were going, how those maintenance plans were going, and going through high school and college and university, trying to figure out, was I implementing any of these RAIDLOGs? Did I see any of these things? I think I did, but the really first time, I'm trying to think of specific time, was when I was trying to identify and kind of pitch a new product line for a small embedded microprocessor company that I was working for in California. And I remember kind of going through this process of listing the different risks or issues that we had with different options, working with my distributors and resellers to try to figure out, in the European market, what was needed, what was missing, how has it been changing, and really kind of swatting these things out. What actions do we need to clarify? What decisions we make ourselves within kind of the engineering and sales group? What decisions do we have to leave to our owner itself. Because at the end of the day, the owner doesn't bless it. Doesn't matter what we do. And later, when I kind of got to other industries, there's largely a kind of an ad hoc exercise. Decisions were here, some actions were here. We see that a lot of different places, and they're kind of scattered. When I joined the kind of energy industry, I really saw that. I saw how close we can get to good. And while working for Cameron Subsea Systems, we had a really great risk program there, kind of custom risk log, interacted with actions, and we really had to have the decisions, but the decisions we kind of covered on a monthly basis, which was informed by the risk log. So I think it was a really, really great tool that we had that was close to a RAID log. It's the closest I've seen in a lot of the service providers. And I did learn kind of quickly that different companies, once you start seeing what look like, differences between different companies, even owners who have been out there, well established, completely different approaches and maturity and how people do things from a service company and an owner company. And they all need to kind of come together to deliver that promise they're making together.
It sounds like you were born into it and you carried it on most of your professional life.
Well, at least I could preach about it.
Well, Jamie, can you tell us about a time when using a RAID log saved a project or maybe helped keep you from having to save a project?
One of the time I implemented a RAID log was when I kind of took over a project that was maybe struggling a little bit. I wouldn't say struggling, but we had just received a new order for a project, one of the biggest projects we've had from an offshore equipment perspective for a company I was working for. And there were a number of technical and commercial gaps that we're seeing through this. It was in the proposal. And as I was going through it, trying to figure out what did we sell, it's always kind of a joke sometimes of project execution folks, as we try to figure out what the business people actually sold, and so we can figure out what we need to do now. Some of that happened, and it was challenging because it was technical issues, some fairly large ones that were pretty big blindside issues, and there are a lot of commercial ramifications for those. For instance, this was being done in the North Sea and offshore in the North Sea, and some equipment that sits on the seafloor. And an obvious one for me was, from a technical standpoint, is that we wanted it to be used by remote operated vehicles, or ROVs, the robots you see doing all the stuff to install and do all the work when it needs to be done, as well as diver. All the two different types of things have completely different laws and regulations and things that you have to consider. And having a diver system makes it a lot bigger because there's a lot of safety concerns and things you need to take into account that you don't need to take into account for when you have a remote operated vehicle. And some of these units grew by probably the envelope about 3 times the size that they initially were. The valves that were inside and things like this, very technical details. It's like, well, you don't have the right specifications, you're not on the API specifications, you don't have the right testing, you don't have the right procurement. So I had this list of things that were gaps technically, and then some commercial gaps that were associated with those, and some additional ones. And put together risks, issues we have, decisions, and started putting this list together and managing it as a single list of these are my risks that I have that we need to manage, and these are the decisions we're going to need on kind of each of these items. And I used that until I worked down most of them, and was successful. And the great thing is that the owner and the engineering company at the time, they agreed with each one of those things. We kind of walked them through each item, and it worked out well.
I love that, using it as a platform for identification and then communicating and getting agreement on those things, because if you don't have that, it's hard to move ahead or make progress on them.
Yeah, and there were a lot. It was tough. And this was the first project. I just jumped into this new org as a kind of a project engineer manager. This is the first kind of project. I was like, oh, wow, thanks. And I did an okay job because our VP of business development tried to poach me after it. So I think I did okay.
That's a good sign. And I guess this illustrates one of the things I found really fascinating in talking with you are just the size and scale of a lot of the kind of projects that you work on in sort of the project controlling world. I mean, these are massive engagements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked on projects that are small. You think about my early career, we thought that you get $100,000 order or something, Oh, that was big. And then you get to a couple $1 million, and then you got multiple tens of millions of dollars, and you got over $100 million. And then, suddenly you're sitting here on an owner's side, looking at a couple projects in flight that you're supporting that are, $1 billion a piece. And then you're kind of supporting from an owner's rep position in multi-billion-dollar projects. And you kind of learn something new each time. And, I think the beauty of lessons learned in RAIDLOG is it helps organizations listen a little bit better, in that, it's not just the screw ups you make yourself that you learn from, but it's the screw ups and successes that others make, and then make sure that you're listening for those things. When I say project controls and risk, especially, it's all about trying to listen for those faint signals so you don't step on those landmines as you're moving forward. And the bigger your project, the more landmines there are. And they're not just simple technical commercial landmines, they're cultural, they're communication. And I always often get asked, oh, how could communication be a multi-million-dollar risk? Like, well, if you don't communicate well, things take a long time. You re-explain the thing over again. You can, if you have a meeting, 20 people in a meeting, it's all day long, and you're not communicating well, how much money did you spend just in that meeting? You might have spent $100,000 in that meeting. Easy. So if you have 10 of those meetings, well, there's $1 million.
Wow. Well, it's cool to hear that there is a valuable place for the humble RAID log, even in massive projects like that.
There's more than a place for it. In fact, sometimes it's often missed for the same problems that you have in smaller projects. I know one of the points you had before, it's one of my soapboxes also, is meeting minutes. Are they useful? Are the actions clear? Are the actions dated? Are the ownership clear? Do people even look at it after you've done it, right? Is it actually recurring, or is it a new meeting each time? Or do you have one that's action? Is it action somewhere through a system? So there's actually accountability on that. And, responsibility and accountability is one of those things where projects, if you don't have it, from the coalface to the C-suite, things fall apart communication wise, and it ends up costing us, money through efficiencies and things like that.
Definitely. Well, now, as valuable as RAID logs are, any tool out there has some strengths and maybe some weaknesses. So I'm curious, what has been your biggest pain point when using a RAID log?
And the biggest pain point for any kind of risk tool out there is getting those people who are accountable and responsible to use them as part of their day-to-day activities, not just a monthly tick the box kind of thing. To me, it's really for all risk decision activities, issues, actions, management, any of that stuff that we have. And the real problem is that, the risk manager is the decision maker. It's not the one with the risk manager title. We're kind of a Sherpa helping you on your journey, helping you understand what the risks and issues are, helping you flesh through what options might be, what the impact, make sure you understand the impacts of those options, make sure that you're trying to solve for the right problem, right? Part of decision management, risk management is that decision the decision that you need to make, or is it made for you? Or is this something you have to make later? Is this really the root decision we need to make today to solve this problem? And risk manager is not making a decision. I often joke that I'm happy to list these treatments and decisions and run through it, but you're going to have to change my title and give me a little more responsibility. I'm happy to do that. And the struggle is getting people used to doing that, because it's seen as extra work. And if you have a team, if you're the project manager, you are accountable for your risk in your P&L, period. If someone else is helping you with it, great, but it's still yours. And if your team is helping it, the team needs to do the work. And it's not on the monthly report. It's every time you have a meeting, with actions that come out, decisions that are coming out, having a holistic, localized, shareable space where you can start putting those things, like a RAID log, is important. And because that gives everyone visibility, keeps people on track. You can, if it's a collaborative system, you can task people with these things. You can run reports on that. You talk about AI and Power BI and things like that. Now you can run more powerful visualized reports that keep you reminded of what you have to do today, rather than trying to write it on your notebook and hope you didn't forget anything. Dan Kahneman wrote a lot about 3 systems of thinking. You get your fast thinking, your slow thinking, and then you get your use of tools, your system 3. And part of the gut feeling that we want, that project managers that are good, we always call them firefighters, right? Because we have good intuition, and we can see something and act and make a decision before it's going to impact us, or act on an issue that just happened. based on our experience or experience that we've seen others do. And, a lot of times you get by with that, but eventually the problem is going to be a little bit bigger than that. And you need to have a faster decision, but you need to spend some time thinking about it. Using these tools, it's kind of that system 3 thinking. The more you practice and practice and practice using these tools, risk logs, RAID logs, risk decision tools, even, looking at fishbone diagrams, FMEAs, all these sorts of things, has-ins, has-offs. How do you go through a risk process, in different forms? The more you practice, the more it becomes second nature for you, and the more you can actually start thinking about risk, in your head. Be like, someone makes a comment, my mind starts spinning and going like, okay, I'm writing down a bunch of things of what you didn't say. And then I want to follow up on those things, because those are things that people involved in risk, commercial and technical, kind of think, oh, it might be something you need to think about. Project managers and all those decision makers need to be kind of in that same role. And they do a lot, but using the risk tools helps them be more practiced. So when you put in a RAID log, it's easy. You kind of know what it is. You can do the work. It doesn't seem like extra work. You get used to doing it. It helps you make decisions faster because you can use the tool. The tool backs up what you're thinking. You say, okay, great. It's like there. You can share it with people at that point in time, be collaborative. And then, boom, you're off and running. But you have to use the tool. You have to practice using the tool. People look at a, complex risk registers sometimes that maybe have a RAID log built into it. It just goes on, 10 ways to Sunday. Oh, it's too complicated. If you look at it, it's not complicated at all, but it is work. You have to be comfortable with the work. The more you do it, the faster it is on that. And that's really my number one pain point, is that people need to use the tools. It needs to not be seen as complicated, because it really isn't. And the more you use it, the less complicated it is. The second challenge, I think, around there is really around how we quantify and organize the information that we have. Risk registers, to a lot of us, are like risk matrices, where we call it the shapes and colors of risk. And some people call it risk management 1, which is kind of the stuff that you see at enterprise risk a lot of times, your COSOs and things like that, where you've got kind of this holistic framework of things. Some people might call it bullshit bingo, where you talk a lot about things. It's very qualitative. It's how do you feel? Oh, that's a red, that's an amber, that's a green. Okay, so what does that really mean in real world? What's important is understanding what those uncertainties are around our objectives. What are our business objectives? What are our project objectives? Right. So it's not just, the organization, it's the project, it's maybe individuals' objectives that they may have. What's going to impact us up or down? Because those are the biases and the information that's going to help us as project managers direct a better project, understand what levers we might be able to pull or not be able to pull. It's a sacred cow. Don't touch it. Every risk is a range, and every risk has interfaces that are being touched in that range. It's not just a single value. There's not a magic percent chance, impact number of occurrences, anything like that. That's just kind of how we want to organize those things. Oh, what's a red risk? Well, is it just something you say is red, or is it something smaller? Maybe it's $100 impact, but it's in reputational impact. So it's really something bigger. It might, really be irking somebody that they want to put that up at their top. I always tell project managers, whatever your top risk is needs to be up there. I don't care what value it is. If you're worried about it, you put it up at the top. And if someone challenges you, I'll help you. Because if it's important to you, it should be important to everybody. Even if you're going to die on that sword, it's important. And a big thing about, people who do risk the best, numbers wise, math wise, arguably it's the actuaries, right? That are out there, your insurance companies and things like that. Even those guys and those reports could be misled when they over compartmentalize these exposure groups. A lot of times you split these out, you split them out, you split them out, you split them out. The triangle gets more dilute at the bottom. And so you have less smaller groups of exposure in insurance. So the smaller groups, depending on what the occurrence chances are historically of those things. Well, I haven't had to pay out for a long time. Is that good or is that bad? They might end up charging the client more for a risky group that maybe just hit their numbers. I hit 2 hurricanes this year instead of 1. The value's up. Or they might have a very low value that's going to impact the underwriter, because they're under supporting their actual exposure amount because of that small group hasn't had a lot of exposure. But when you start aggregating it with some of their siblings, oh, well, we've got this one wrong.
I really like everything you said there. A couple of things that really stood out for me was this idea of practice, make muscle memory out of
Yeah.
using the tool so you can get experience there. And then your reference to Kahneman's work, Kahneman's, is that the right kind of, okay. Great book though. And I'll have a link to it in the notes here about the different systems thinking and pulling it into that. But on your last point, I'd like to ask another question here to drill down a little bit deeper, and that's this idea about quantifying and organizing the information. So let's say I'm a freshly minted PMP and I really don't have a whole lot of exposure to managing risk. As an expert, what would be one piece of information you can give me to help me be better at quantifying and organizing info in my RAID log for risks?
Yeah. Some will salute me and some will shoot me for this comment. The first comment is forget what's in the PMP, forget what's in Prince 2, forget what's in ISO, forget what's in COSO, forget what Deloitte and or any of the big fours might be saying about risk management, how you do it, and this and that. Most of it's shapes and colors. It doesn't address the biggest problem, which is, if you're the PM, you just started first project, you're the risk manager. That's number one, right? What are you concerned about? What is your team concerned about? What's already happening? What might happen? What don't you know, right? Because as a PM, we often, try to be the smartest person in the room, right? And the struggle is it's lonely as a PM in that job role. And only of us who've been a PM understand why I say that. You have to surround yourself with people that you trust that can uncover those things for you, that can hopefully be a lot smarter than you in these things, especially if you're first starting out. You have to have your ears open, and anything that might be a concern, write it down, list it, share it, evangelize it. Small things, big things. Challenge your numbers, ask 5 whys on all these things to try to figure out what do you have in front of you. Do you understand what you're supposed to deliver? And that's the biggest thing, because sometimes you're being asked to deliver something that may not be deliverable. You might hit 5 out of 10 of them, but you won't hit 10 out of 10 of them, especially when you talk about, what's the nature of a successful project. Two of the things that are always there is cost and schedule, on time, on budget. Those are the 2 hardest things to hit. If you want me to tell you when a project's going to be done and how much it costs, I'll tell you, I can give you a number 100% accurate. It's when it's closed out. Even then, it might be tricky because there's still warranties and claims and things that might be hanging out there, But otherwise than that, I can give you a range. And understanding that all risks and all uncertainty is a range. When's it going to be done? Well, it needs to be done by June of 27. Okay, that's when you'd like it to be done, right? If it's done December 27, can you live with that? Oh, we can't. It needs to be done 27. Okay, so maybe you need to go back to your business planning and understand what your real back end bookmark is. Because if I don't know what my bookend is here, if I'm saying that because this is where we like it to be, this is our desired outcome, that's great. But if you're making decisions based on desired outcomes, well, 90% of the time or greater, you're going to miss it. You're going to be disappointed. And you're going to say, why is it taking so long? Why does it cost so much? Well, you put your flag here. But if your flag's not based on the market, the reality of your experts, what you're designing, what you're asking to build, whatever it is, you have to be living in the now. And risk is about being more predictable. Being more predictable isn't giving you a financial number; it's giving you a range, and you can decide what you want to report in that range. Markets don't like ranges, right? And some companies go on the back end, some kind of go more conservative on this end. However you want to report, whatever makes you sleep at night is fine. But understand that whatever number I give you isn't going to be the number you're going to end up with. If it is, someone's sandbagging.
Well, I like your approach that don't get wrapped up in different methodologies and really summarize it. So it sounds like be pragmatic.
I mean, you think about IT security risk, right? Well, that's a big market, a huge thing. Well, what are you doing now? What's the real risk, right? How many people have gone in through your employees' email systems to get stuff? Right? How many times have you been hit? How much are you willing to invest to prevent those things from happening, right? And at the end of the day, you're going through the employee is the easiest way to get in. The rest of the stuff's pretty hard, unless you've
Yeah.
got some antiquated equipment.
I also like the way you talked about the risk management area being about being more predictable
Yeah.
or being a little more certain that there's never going to be an exact certainty. It's just maybe a little bit more if we follow this
Yeah.
approach.
And so predictability, when we start with endeavors, the amount of uncertainty is high. So it's like a sales funnel. If you're out there doing generic sales, you always say that 10% of the customers will talk to you, 10% of that will actually buy something from you, right? So your funnel really narrows down. If you're started with 100, well, now you got 10 and you got one customer out of the 100 that you talk to, right? So if you think about that in the scales of projects, it's a sales funnel put on its side. You've got a range going through of where your total installed costs or your total development costs, whatever it is, your total cost budget for whatever endeavor you're in, depending on how much is known. If you don't know what the project is, you better have some big bookends on there, unless it's not really, if it's a rinse and repeat project, then maybe you have a lot more certainty around that. But if you don't know, then you need to add more to your range, quantify what you don't know and how that might impact things. And it could be just as a production number. So you're doing process engineering. I have a certain thing. This is the volume I want. Okay, this is the volume, target volume. Yeah, will that target volume change in 2 years' time? Oh yeah, probably. We'll do some debottlenecking, this and that. Okay, so are you going to potentially, as we're building these, before we order the equipment, 2 years from now, you have some new things coming out from a different site? Are you gonna want to do it now? Oh yeah, okay. Then we need to plan for that and not be caught by surprise and say, hey, here's a risk of process engineering not leaving and letting us build stuff. So in life sciences, this happens a lot. And so you need to kind of build that in. What's a schedule impact? What's a cost impact? And then you can make the decision on, do you want to assume the schedule's built in? We want to put buffer in there for that? Because that will be challenged. And the cost could be challenged, but you can say, well, that's contingency money. But the schedule contingency, that's always challenged, right? If I want to say I want to put a 3-month buffer on here, oh, you can't do that. Okay.
But I'm curious to get your thoughts around how AI may impact or may not impact, or maybe is already impacting project management, particularly around risk and issue management.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, yeah, I've been kind of on the fence about AI. It's been a buzzword, along with machine learning, and there's lots of different types of AI kind of buzzwords that are going around there. And it's a lot of people don't understand it. They think it's new and something that's different, but it's been around a very long time. The differentiator now is that it's so fast that the computers are faster, the processors are faster. We have access to a lot more data today, and disparate data, different types of data. And all that is we give the program access to that data. Now we can learn things about the data. When we learn things, it's just taking search engine words. So I'm doing Boolean searches. I'm taking those things and trying to understand, what do I get back from it? With that fast speed, we're able to do these neural networks and multiple kind of search things together that we weren't able to effectively process quickly before. And I think that's what's changed today. And it's making search engines maybe meaningful again. It's quite interesting. You look at general search engines and the same companies that have AI platforms, and you kind of scratch your head a little bit and wonder sometimes is, well, why don't you use that new AI platform as your main search engine?
Yeah.
Because it's way better than your main search engine, which it's just a sales tool now, it seems like. But again, it's super useful as that data search engine that we have. It saves us time trying to look for things, looking at benchmarks, looking at trying to collect information from outside the industries. As long as we have access to that information and we can tell it to access that information and allow it to access that information, we can glean a lot of different things. Even things like writing a research paper, right? If you're in university or you're working on a doctorate degree or you're just writing a technical paper in a professional group, sometimes one of the tough things is I've got an idea and I can't just write it on my own. I have to go cite other people's work, right? I have to go find out. I want to try to disprove my hypothesis, right? And so I got to go find people that are detractors or what I'm saying. Maybe I'll find a couple supporters at the same time. Um, but AI lets us go do that. I can find it quickly. I can not only find the author and the book and the paper, I might be able to get the words. Boom, here's the paragraph. Oh, I can cite it perfectly. I don't need to spend hours and hours and hours going to libraries and stuff like that trying to figure out who to put on my dissertation paper. I can do it very quickly. And so that's extremely helpful when you're trying to find information like that. It doesn't say that you don't need to read, but it points you in the right direction faster so you can read those things. Now, the challenge there is that, and one of the things I mentioned, like when you compare it to a paper, is that you really want to try to use AI to disprove some of the things you have. If you're looking for AI to support your bias or your position, and this could just be a commercial position, it will do that, unless it's something off the wall. So you want to try to put out information and challenge that information. Is it correct? Am I getting it right? It gives you that kind of first shot across the bow of information. You still need your expertise, your people to go through that information and understand, is it relevant to what we're doing? And that's kind of being careful about AI, is that it's very powerful, but it can reinforce the biases you might already have based on the information it has. And AI is only as good, because the search engine is only as good as the information it has access to, and is only as good as the instructions being given to it. It's just a computer program. It's just an if and then, maybe very complicated neural network web, but it's a program that someone has written that is based on information that it's been fed. So when it learns, it needs good information. It can learn because it's corrected on the information, and it will put that in its program to think, go search. When that happens again, this guy said it was wrong, so I'm going to take that into account. Again, you got to be careful about technology in general. I think it's great. I think all of us that are in the Gen X, we've straddled both worlds. And so we've embraced technology. We love technology. We can use technology well, but we remember a time when none of this was there, right? I still have an 8088 in a box. So I'm a little long in the tooth. I got a dot matrix printer somewhere too, right? There's a great read. I was looking for it on my bookshelf for this, and I referenced it a couple times in a couple discussions here in the last few years, specifically for AI. Neil Postman wrote a book called Technopoly a few decades back, and it highlights the concerns that we have on the over-reliance of technology and accepting information that comes from computers as gospel and from technology as gospel, rather than accepting it as potentially fallible. Yeah, it's as fallible as we are because we're the ones who wrote the stuff. So we really need to confirm any underlying assumptions we have when we're using this. And that said, for risks, some of the things that I've been on the fence with and I've been playing with, I found it very helpful in getting information that's kind of generic, but a lot of times when we start projects, they always ask us to come up with really generic stuff to begin with. It's like, well, okay, here's some generic starters, right? But we'll get into the meat potatoes after the generic stuff.
Yeah, I like what you said there about not taking an AI recommendation or AI data just for face value and assuming that it's true, because it shouldn't, I would say, if anything, it should not replace our judgment, but it should fire up our judgment to be even more critical, because it becomes more important in that scenario when you've got the power to have an AI scour through, gigabytes of data and be a great research assistant. You still need to make sure you turn that judgment on, because that's becomes, I guess, more valuable part of our part of that equation.
Yeah, that lets us, do what we do, which is be a little more pragmatic about it. But you said it's a research assistant. I think that's probably a good term for it. There's some cool stuff that's going out on using AI to help, tutoring in math. A big thing around, using technology to tutor folks, online tutoring and things like that. A long time it's been that you can never replace a person for tutoring. That one-on-one tutoring for your elementary school through high school math. Yes, it was a big target. That is something that always had the best results in tests. There's some new findings that are coming out now that AI programs are good enough now with kind of it's a standard set of things to how people learn and teach it and math concepts, that those are almost one-to-one with personal tutoring now, because some of the AI engines, you'll take those natural language prompts and they'll adapt based on those prompts. So it'll be a little more customized to maybe these are what you're having problem with. And then you're putting a personal input into that box, and it's taking your problem sets with your inputs and matching those words up, and maybe offering a different solution that it's, that's been programmed. Say, if this happens, then try to do this, because this is what a human tutor would have done. And the human tutor is the person they're asking about, well, if this happens, what do you do? Well, I do this. Okay, we're going to learn off that. The AI will learn on what you do. When we think about Elon Musk's robot, right, that he has, I forget the name of it, but it's pretty cool, right? How is that doing machine learning? Well, it's learning off of subject matter experts. It's got range of motion. It's showing that it's be able to cook now, play the piano even, right? So these are some pretty cool things. So you think about it, it's like, here's a good use for AI. How do you learn? So maybe Gordon Ramsay's out there, and Tesla pays Gordon Ramsay a bunch of money to cook like him. And so he sits there, with his claptrap on, doing all his stuff. How's he thinking? What's he doing? How's he preparing food? And you can order a Gordon Ramsay bot for your robot, and your robot will cook like Gordon Ramsay, but you still got the guy behind it. What if there's a problem? Well, I don't know. I'm not Gordon Ramsay. Maybe is he doing it the right way? Tastes okay.
One of the other things you said really resounded from me is we always go in to what we do with biases, and we can use AI to support those biases inadvertently.
Yeah.
And so I really like your tip there of try to use AI to break your bias, to give me a counterpoint, tell me where I'm wrong on this. And so I'm curious, what other tips might you have for somebody, AI or not, but when they use a RAIDLOG?
For me, it goes back to, what do we use project controls or risk and decision management for? RAIDLOG is a tool to support that endeavor. Make sure that we list and understand our interfaces, our assumptions, the impacts that they have on decision options. Make sure when we're putting decisions out there, usually there's more than one option. There's definitely at least two. There's doing nothing, which is a decision.
Yep.
And then there's doing their options. So there's at least two. Maybe there's more. You try to figure out, if you're solving for the right thing, there might be more than one solution. Don't be tied to one option. Make sure it's a little more work. You got to put more lines in. I understand, but that lets you walk through the problem, especially if it's a bigger, more strategic problem. You want to spend the time on it. Don't forget to understand what the objectives are put at risk. So what objectives are in your project, in your organization, the risks and issues and decisions are affecting some objective that you have. Otherwise, it's not worth it, right? So it could be a cost thing, it could be a time thing, it could be a personality thing. I don't know what it is, but you have to understand this is going to impact something and maybe someone. Maybe it impacts someone's KPIs on their yearly review. That's important, especially when you start getting to the C-suite, right? If that's what it is, great. You might need to get someone external to help you with it at that point in time, because they may need to facilitate a discussion to help that person talk to the person above them about why the performance on this project shouldn't impact them financially. And above all, I think the most important this is a pro tip, use the tool. If you don't use the tool, you're not going to get that practice makes perfect. If you got tools out there, it might be work, but you got to use it. The RAIDLOG that you have is a great tool, puts everything in one spot. You need to have something like that. You need to be able to do that. You need to understand that, risks are future looking. They're not events. Some of them are events, but there's things that are impacting you. They could be events. They could be things that are not events. And if you don't make a decision, or even if you do, they could turn into an issue. The issue is different than managing a risk, right? So when it's an issue, I can't mitigate it, right? Mitigation is just on the front of that bow tie. I'm on contingency planning now. Did I have a contingency plan for it, or did it just blindside me? And I have an issue. I got more than one option for an issue too. How I manage that. That's what it is. Put the dollar and the time on it and say, lessons learned. Or, can I lower the impact somewhere else? Yeah. maybe the lessons learned is, hey, I got a sister project happening right now. It hasn't hit them yet. They're not in funding yet. I can at least make sure they're funded so they don't get caught by surprise.
Absolutely. So we got to understand our options and use the tool.
Use the tool.
Use the tool. I love that one. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your risk management experience. If our audience wants to find out more about what you're doing and what you're up to, or maybe make contact, how can they best do that?
Yeah, the easy way to get in touch with me is just go on LinkedIn, Jamie Marzonie. You'll find me. I'm the only one there. And if you're looking at services for, especially in the life sciences industry, go check ipsdb.com out. We service, our owners, and we service the EPCM provider too. So we can build things for the owners, and we also kind of help them design the medications and the technology for the future. And we always like to say, we're eager to help because the patients are waiting.
Excellent. Well, we'll have all those links in our show notes as well, so you can find them there. And Jamie, again, thank you so much for taking time to join us today and showing us your RAIDLOG.
Thank you so much, Kim. Good seeing you again.
For our audience, if you'd like to step up your project management game, you can check out our new RAIDLOG application called raidlog.com. We're bringing the tried and true RAIDLOG into the 21st century with the only platform dedicated to giving project managers all the tools they need to succeed in project delivery, starting with the RAIDLOG. Check it out at raidlog.com.